Good morning, everyone. Morning. I see we have a few people on the link already. I'm just going to give 1 or 2 minutes just for everyone to settle in and join, just so that you can grab your coffee and sit back and relax and enjoy the session with us. All right. So I see there are people joining. I don't want us to start too late. So I think we can start with our introductions so long, so that we don't take too much of Linnell's presentation time. She has a really nice session lined up for us today. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. Hello, everyone. Big welcome to all of you today. It's Friday, so we hope you have a nice day lying ahead, and we're very excited to be sharing our webinar, Let's Talk Skills, Turning Tax into Talent Budget. So my name is Helena Nel. I'm the Senior HR Consultant at P&H Solutions. And with me today, we have Linnell. I'll introduce her shortly. She's our transformation specialist. We also have Annemien Victor on the call with us, who is our service delivery manager at P&H Solutions. And then, while we have our last delegates joining, I see people joining as we're presenting. I'm just going to hand over to Annemien to quickly introduce us as a company to you and give you a bit of background as to who we are as P&H.
Thank you, Lena. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. A warm welcome to our webinar, Let's Talk Skills. We're really pleased to have so many HR professionals, L&D practitioners, and skills development facilitators with us. As Elena said, I'm Annemien Victor. I'm the Services Director at P&H Solutions, looking after the implementation side of the business, the support of the business, and the day-to-day operations of P&H Solutions. I think, as you all know, we are a platinum partner implementing the Sage 300 products, implementing the Sage Payroll Advanced and the old VIP products in our suite. So we do support, we do implementation, and all of the HR modules as well. Back to the Let's Talk Skills today. Skills development is often seen as something we simply have to do for compliance, but today's conversation is really looking at it a little bit differently, and therefore we've got Linnell on the line. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers for today, Linnell and Elena, who brings a wealth of experience in skills development and helping organizations making the most of their skills planning and grant opportunities. So we're not just there on the system side, but we're also there on the assistance with any consulting that you would need. Thank you both for sharing your time and expertise with us today. So Linnell and Elena, over to you guys. We're looking forward to today.
Thanks, Annemien.
Thank you. So guys, if you have joined us, thank you so much. Linnell, as Annemien mentioned, and I am a transformation consultant. We would love for you guys to engage with us in a few minutes while we are waiting for a few more participants. If you can please scan the code to our Mentimeter, we'd like to know what is your biggest challenge that your organization faces regarding skills development. So please have a few minutes just to put in your challenges. Alina, you can let me know if it's working, if we are getting participation.
Yes, I see the link is working.
Perfect.
The link is working on my end. Let's have a look.
Not seeing any challenges yet, guys. Have you scanned the code?
So, Lynelle, I think let's present it. Let me present the results on my end.
No
I can
problem.
see they're all coming through. I think, yeah, I think they're just not displaying on the slide add-on, but
problem.
let me quickly share my screen. We are actually getting quite a lot of results in.
Good, good.
Yes, so I'm just going to quickly share this with you.
I can't see the answers yet, but I'm pretty sure someone has chosen budget constraints.
Yes, definitely. Definitely, it is big here, budget constraints. Let me just quickly start sharing my screen with you. So definitely have budget constraints on there. Let's have a look. So we have budget loud and proud. Lynelle,
Yes,
I'm
I
assuming
think
this this is
that's the
something
one
you
that
see in
most people
practice a
are
lot.
saying. Budget,
Most
definitely.
recognizable for everyone.
Yes.
Loud and proud there. We also have the second big one there on the word cloud. We're still getting active responses on here, by the way, but time
That's great. Yeah.
time also seems to be a big one.
Yes, so with everyone pushing productivity, sometimes it's very difficult to get people out of the production line, out of their time of work at work for them to spend that dedicated focus on training. I know that's definitely a big one.
Yeah,
I can see
definitely.
procurement challenges. I think is that in terms of actually getting service providers or training providers. I see there is a lack of providers as well and minimal service providers, so that's coming across quite a bit. I think
Yes.
also, especially if you're looking at accredited training with the change from the QCTO and the CETA-based qualifications, we are finding that there are fewer training providers that are already equipped and
Yes.
accredited to provide those programs. So that
Yes.
that could be it. Or
Yes.
if you're
Yes.
in a specific or niche type of market, I know it's very difficult to find training providers in like construction, for example.
Yeah.
It could be your geographical location that you struggle to get training providers. I see there is lack of buy-in, and that's an important one, especially for the people who hold the purse strings. If
Yeah.
they don't buy in, or for top management, they don't find or the purpose or need for training or see the value in it, it's very difficult to then translate that into a budget.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, something is matching the right skills. Yeah, I see there quite a lot of choices of subject. So
And a reactive
selecting
approach.
reactive approach.
Reactive
So
approach. So I'm assuming a reactive approach is usually now when your health and safety certificates have expired and you realize you don't have first aiders and firefighters anymore. So you have to go through and quickly get that training done.
yeah,
So
or maybe
I think
scrambling last minute to submit your reports and get all of your data together.
Yes, yes. So, I mean, thank you guys so much for participating. All of these challenges are definitely valid, and we come across it consistently in the market. And we're hoping that with today's presentation, we'll be able to be more forward-looking in terms of planning, and help you guys use your tax rebates in order to plan a talent budget. Because as we can see, budget constraints are the biggest reason or challenge that we're having today for training. So if we can be able to show our finance department, show our top management how we can use our talent budget with the minimal amounts from out of pocket spend, we can then motivate for more training.
Definitely. So Lynelle, I'm going to stop sharing on my end and then you can just present the slides again. There we go. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you. So guys, why are we here today? Well, we have mentioned to you, as you've seen in our marketing, a lot of the time skills development is seen as a tick box exercise, something that gets left till the last minute. So if you haven't already been starting with your skill submission, you are the person we are speaking about, because we're now almost halfway into March, and we know that 30th of April is the deadline for skills development. So now is our busy period when it comes to skills. We know that it's sometimes treated as an annual administrative cycle, and what we want to change it to, or change the viewpoint in today's session, is using it to become a strategic talent budget, capability building engine. So like people said in the Mentimeter, mismatched skills, if we use our mismatched skills to find the gap towards what we need within a certain occupation, we can build that capability through training. And definitely to have a competitive advantage. We know that a skilled workforce already puts you ahead of an unskilled workforce. It brings about innovation, ideas, and that's what we want to encourage in our employees. So our content for today, we're going to do a little bit of understanding around the WSP ATR and the available grants to you guys, how we actually turn our tax into a strategic talents budget. So we've got an active example that we'd like to use with you. Some common pitfalls in skills planning. How do we actually go about aligning our skills initiatives to capability needs? And then to ensure effective and compliant skills planning. So we'll also be taking a Q&A section at the end. So you're welcome to hold on to your questions for a bit as we go through the presentation. So if we understand why skills matters now, if you think about it, there's been a huge shift in job roles as we know it. So historical jobs are now different with the introduction of AI, technology, digital platforms. The world of work has changed as we know it some 10, 20 years ago. With that, we have seen the need for qualifications to be upgraded. At the moment, qualifications have been a little bit obsolete, and the SETA qualifications were still aligned to old job roles and unit standards that are now more or less obsolete. Therefore, we have seen the shift from qualifications being monitored by SETA and SAQA to QCTO, which is the Quality Council for Trade and Occupation. So what has happened is, according to the QCTO qualifications, they have now put out new qualifications that are upgraded. They have been closely aligned to what the working world actually needs now. And what we've noticed is that their qualifications actually carry more credits in certain instances. So previously, if you had a learnership that was a year long and carried 100 credits. Now you've got QCTO qualifications that can be 18 months to even 24 months long, carrying credits up until 300, for example. So the important role and job shift in the market has led to now qualifications needing to be upgraded. So it's important to understand what we can apply for from the SETA if we want to also upgrade our employees. In terms of digital transformation, the methods of learning has changed. So we have been used to face-to-face training for a long time, or assumed that that was the only way to get training done. But as you can see, even in the world of our webinars at the moment, there's so much of information that we are able to communicate via webinars as compared to seminars where people used to physically come into a room and we would share updates of legislation, for example. So with the digital transformation, the methods of learning have changed. People can do self-learning. They can log into LMS portals. They can do e-learning. They can be learnerships that are provided online versus on-site. I think it helps us to cater for the learner and to cater for the environment. So like a lot of people said, we can't get our people out of the office or out of the floor to be able to conduct training. But there are certain programs that if they are truly keen on engaging in those programs, they can do e-learning in their own time. They can do online interactions where I've seen some training providers would do a half-day program. So half the day you would engage in the class and then you return to work. On the next day or 2 days later, you would conduct the other half of the class. I think in a way that also helps for people with absorption of information. Sometimes sitting in a training session for the entire day can also allow for the information to go over your head and be very overwhelming. In terms of the scarcity of critical skills, which is linked to the SETA, it's important to understand what is a scarce or a critical skill within your own industry and sector. So if you are a client that has to submit to FP&M SETA or to MER SETA, it's important for you to understand the SSP, so the Sector Skills Plan. You are welcome to go onto the internet, onto the website, search for the Sector Skills Plan, download it. They usually determine the scarce and critical skills, check which of those skills actually align to your business. So you know when you're applying for funding, it's important to prioritize the scarce and critical skills because that is where the SETA is prioritizing the funding. So for people with budget constraints that need scarce and critical skills, it's important to apply to your WSP so that you can receive the funding accordingly. And then in terms of pressure on organizations to remain compliant and competitive in terms of your BEE points, skills development is a priority element. And depending on your payroll in your company, your spend could be quite high. So we're looking at 6% overall when it comes to the general code. And let's be real about it. When you are providing evidence to a verification agency, they're looking at the proof of payment. Nobody really checks where that money came from. So if you've got BE spends and pressure for BE spends, it's best to apply for the funding from the SETA and through your WSP so that not all of that spend has to be out of the pocket of the company. In terms of looking at the WSP, if anyone is on the entry level here, the workplace skills plan is forward-looking. So it looks at planning your training for the year ahead or the period ahead. And what we usually need to do is identify the skills that we need to implement in the company or would be good to have in the company. So usually we would go through what is our mandatory skills that we require. So operationally required training, if it is your first aid, your firefighting, you're working at heights, whatever training that is mandatory that you need to get done, we usually prioritize that to go into our WSP first. Then we look at performance needs, compliance needs, performance needs. We look at matching personal development plans. So looking at what an individual needs to thrive or maybe to even move to the next level in terms of your succession planning. And then we put that into the WSP as well. And then lastly, we have to make sure that it aligns to our organizational strategy. So when it comes to your workplace skills plan, you're not going to plan for training that falls outside of your environment. I mean, if you're in the finance sector, you're not going to be applying for programs that are artisans. It matters what the organizational strategy is. So we have to look at these different elements when putting our actual plan together for what we would want to train in the next reporting period. And then your annual training report or the ATR is actually looking back on what you've already done. So what has been the training that you have already implemented? Do you have your relevant evidence in place? If it's certificates of compliance, if it's attendance registers, those are the evidence that's required if there's an audit from the SETA. And SETAs are different. So for example, some SETAs ask you to upload evidence of your training, whereas some SETAs don't ask you for the evidence of the training, and upon an inspection or an audit, they would request it. So it's always important to keep that information filed and accessible. So if there is a SETA audit, you guys do have the information readily available. So in terms of understanding the grants that are available, the first is a mandatory grant. So like we have spoken about the mandatory training needs or compliance needs, your mandatory grant is for training that is mandatory. So it's 20% that is available, 20% of your SDL, which is your skills development levy that you pay to SARS, that goes over to the SETA. It's paid upon the WSP ATR approval. So that's important. It gets paid in 4 tranche payments. So over the year, you should be monitoring that you actually are receiving your payments if you've received communication from the SETA to say that your WSP has been approved. Now, what is interesting to note is that in the budget speech, the president alluded to the fact that they would like to change the 20% of the SDL back to 40%. So way back when, at the original start of the Skills Development Levy Act and the Skills Development Act, the grant was set at 40%. It was then reduced to 20%, and up to 49.5% was available for discretionary funding. So it would be quite a game changer if that does happen, and our mandatory grant gets then set at 40%, because just for a successful submission of your WSP and ATR, then the company can receive 40%. Okay. Discretionary grants, and here's where the real magic happens, is up to 49.5%, but by virtue of its name, discretionary, it's at the discretion of the SETA. Here is why planning is important. So if you want to achieve the discretionary grant, you want to plan according to the priority skills for the SETA. Remember, the SETA is looking at what are the scarce and critical skills within that particular industry. And funny enough, if you guys have ever submitted a WSP before, most SETAs ask you, what is your scarce and critical skills? A lot of companies leave that section blank or don't put thought into it when they're capturing it, but it is that information that actually informs the sector skills plan. So it's quite important. If the training is important to you, if you have hard to fill vacancies, it's important to fill that section of the WSP so that the SETA can collect that information. And when they put out the priority skills, what you're looking for actually matches the list. It is SETA specific, so some discretionary grant windows are open now during the WSP ATR submission period. Sometimes you will get certain SETAs that open windows throughout the year. So again, it's important for you to understand which SETA you belong to and be following up on their websites regularly. Once you're registered as their skills development facilitator, you also do receive certain communications. So if there's a special grant that's available or an expression of interest window that opens for specific initiatives, you will be informed about it and you'll have the opportunity to apply for that funding. It is a competitive application process. Of course, where funding is available, it would be competitive. But again, if you stick to the scarce and critical skills, and I always say apply for the funding. The worst that could happen is that you don't receive the funding. But at some point, if the SETA sees that you are actually asking for the funding year on year, at some point they will give you the funding in order to see how you handle it and implement the program once you receive the funding. Discretionary grants are for accredited programs. So that means it must result in a qualification or part of a qualification. So it usually supports programs like learnerships, internships, apprenticeships, bursaries, and skills programs. Okay, so now we get to the interesting part when we're looking at our example. we want to calculate our return on investment for skills. So how are we turning our tax into a strategic budget? If we're looking at an example of a company within the wholesale and retail sector, they would then belong to W&R SETA. If we're looking at the example, we've got 60 employees as a headcount. We've got an annual payroll of 20 million. Like I mentioned, our sector is wholesale and retail. And then if we calculate our skills development levy contribution, which is usually 1% of the payroll, that would be 200,000 Rand for the year. So if we look at what is available to us just at the point of the mandatory grant, 20% of that STL of the 200,000, that's claimable on the submission or approval of the WSP ATR. We would get a 40,000 Rand rebate just based on successfully submitting a WSP and an ATR. What gives you a successful submission? You must have trained something and you must plan to train something. Okay, so even if it's just your mandatory training, your first aid and your firefighting, even if it's 5 initiatives, that is a successful submission that you've trained something and you've planned to train it. Okay, based on that, you would get back 40,000 Rand. Now, remember, if we're going and applying for discretionary grants, and it is SETA dependent, and this is for the purpose of the illustration, if we're looking at learnerships, you can usually get funded around 30 to 45,000 Rand per learner. A skills program is between 3,000 and 7,000 Rand per learner. Internships are about 18 to 24,000 per intern. And if the company, our estimate now is if the company implements 3 learnerships, then we could get an estimated DG funding of around 40,000 Rand, which is 120,000 Rand for the year. This is excluding if you also apply to the SETA to say, yes, I want the cost of the learnership covered, but I also want the stipend covered. So you can also apply for the stipend that the learner would receive for the 12 months or now with QCTO qualifications for 18 or 24 months. Okay, then another section that we can look at rebates is for our 3 learnerships and using the 12H tax allowance. This is an incentive that is used to incentivize companies to initiate and implement learnerships in their businesses. If you guys do comply with BBBEE, you will see there is a line item in the skills development scorecard that is specifically geared towards learnerships. And so you can see the direction in that the government is trying to incentivize making sure that people come out with a qualification. So unemployed learners can receive a qualification that can help them to be more employable, thereby also addressing the elephant in our room, which is our unemployment rate. So for 3 learnerships, if we're using the typical values that are provided by SARS at the moment, an annual allowance per learner is 40,000 Rand, and that's usually when you can claim it when the learner has registered. You also get a completion allowance, and that is if the learner finishes the learnership, you would get 40,000 Rand per learner as well. So it's a total of 80,000 Rand per learner as a tax deduction. So we're looking at a possible tax deduction of 240,000. The important thing to note here is this is for unemployed learners and also for able-bodied learners. If you happen to have an unemployed learner who is also disabled, the allowance is then higher and you get around 120,000 Rand per learner. Okay, so your total potential benefit is your mandatory grant of 40,000, the 120,000 Rand from the discretionary grant, as well as the learnership tax deduction. So your total budget that you can cater for is around 400,000 Rand. Now remember, the learnership figures are specific to that program, but your 40,000 Rand from the mandatory grant can be used for any type of training. Okay, our common pitfalls in skills planning, definitely not treating it as a strategy and rather as an administrative exercise. It can become quite frustrating and cumbersome if it's not a passion, if it's not something that you deal with in advance, if you actually don't even like planning for skills, it can become something that is more of an administrative task. And if there's no link to organizational capability needs, so then you yourself are not going to see the need for certain training. But if we know we need to upskill a certain department, a certain job role, or even an individual for that example, and you know what skills are required in order to bring that person up to the required standard and build capability, it links back to even succession planning. So if you think about employment equity, we need to look at, do we have succession plans in place? Do we have personal development plans in place for our designated groups? Part of the training is also to then plot the different types of training the person might need to go through in order to upskill themselves to be ready to fit into a key role at some stage. If there's poor data quality or incomplete reporting, that will obviously also result in probably a declined or unapproved WSP ATR, because we have to ensure that the data that we put into the submission is quality, it's verified, that we complete all sections of the reporting as well in order for us to have an approved WSP. Certainly, if we miss the CETA deadlines, and it does happen, guys, it does happen. I've had even an instance last year already where I think the HR department was overwhelmed, overswamped, and they completely missed the CETA deadline, and it was also too late to apply for an extension. Please don't think that applying for an extension is something that's guaranteed. Remember, most CETAs open their portals in January. So you literally got on from January till the end of April to submit your WSP. So there's very few reasons that are deemed acceptable for that grant. Or for the deadline. So I think it's important, if you know you're going to miss the deadline or you're not going to be on time, apply for the extension in advance. However, make every possible effort to at least complete some of the submission. So the earlier you apply for the extension with a valid reason, it's more than likely that you'll be granted, but try your best to meet the deadline, because when it comes to the extension, you only know if you're granted an extension after the deadline has passed. So it is going to be trouble for you if come the deadline, you don't know if you've received the extension. The deadline passes and the extension gets declined. So also you'll be missing out on the levies for that year for the company. The sad thing is, if you're not submitting your skills report, all of that funding that you're missing out on, because it's your STL that you're paying, is going to other entities that are training. So if we're sitting in a place where we're stuck for budgets for training, have we done all that we can do to get the relevant grants that are available to us? And then misalignment between the HR, the learning and development, and business units. I think sometimes the designation or the job of training needs analysis, they don't know who's supposed to be doing it. It's important that you guys assess the business unit and realize, okay, heads of department, they work with the employees every day. Maybe they are the best person to tell us what the skill shortage is. So important, if you have mismatched skills or you don't know what courses match, there's a number of ways you can conduct a training needs analysis, and we're happy to help you go through those methods as well. In terms of aligning our skills initiatives to capability needs, effective skills planning is required. It is still a bit late now, but there's still time. So we're coming and approaching that deadline very quickly. So you still have time to plan initiatives. You need to understand your future workforce requirements. So also when we said it needs to match the organization strategies, you guys know from being in consultations with management where the business is looking at heading in the next 5 to 10 years, you can then understand the needs of what a future workforce would require. Like I'm saying, AI is something that is quite big in the industry right now, and we never know whereabout you're going to have to use it in your planning and in your day-to-day activities in a business. So sometimes it might be worth it to get certain individuals AI ready, and they can attend courses on digitization or digital transformation. In identifying your critical and scarce skills, that's what's going to help you to also get funding if you firstly identify the scarce and critical skill and then can match it to your SETA or industry. And then mapping roles to competencies. I think it's important to understand that if a certain requirement or competency is required for a role, and we have now hired someone who maybe doesn't have one of those competencies, in order for that person to progress and thrive in that role, they're going to need to achieve that competency. So it is for us as HR practitioners and skills development facilitators to figure out what the gap is and then bridge that gap. In terms of prioritizing development that drives performance, performance is the key indicator in any business. And if we have people that are struggling with performance, and you can pick it up depending on the role, we have to look at what type of development or training can aid or assist that person in picking up their performance as well. And lastly, integrating skills planning into the workforce strategy. So it's important to understand your people, understand where they are headed in their careers, and help them in terms of skills planning. We've had instances in certain industries or businesses where there is a specific email box that's created where employees can then give their suggestions for what they feel they need in their role to do their work better. Of course, that doesn't mean every single training that is requested will be granted, but it gives us a good indication of what people feel they need in their job to do better. Then you can align it to maybe what the department head has suggested as needs for training. Then we can roll it up all the way to actually what is needed in terms of the organizational goals and strategies. So again, skills does require time if it's to be implemented correctly or to gather the data that is required to have a meaningful WSP. And this should be looked at throughout the year, not just when it comes to the submission period. And just as I spoke about it, using important data to inform the decisions, to engage your stakeholders early, and to track training throughout the year. Maintain evidence for audits, that's quite important as well, and align with the SETA requirements, especially if you want to tap into that discretionary funding. Know your SETA skills sector plan and be able to apply for funding in line with that. You are allowed to review and adjust continuously. So again, if you're working on it throughout the year, you have time to adjust course and to change requirements and still be successful in your planning of skills development. Okay, and then just an important reminder, the WSP submission deadline is the 30th of April. If you've got in a company with 50 or more employees, you should be having quarterly meetings. So there must be a skills development committee that is in place as well. Evidence of training completed is important to keep because, again, certain SETAs require that in the current submission. And then what we've noticed over the last couple of years is that some SETAs actually require your BEE status in your application. If we think about the consequence of that, it could be that when it comes to discretionary funding, they're going to look at your BEE status, but it hasn't been explicitly put out there. However, it is a requirement for certain SETAs to have their BEE level also uploaded into the system. So clearly it will be influential at some point. Yep. And that is me and my presentation. So I'm not sure, Lena, do you want to jump into the system and then we'll go to questions, or should we look at some questions first?
I think, Linnell, maybe let us quickly do the questions, and then
Great.
we can just conclude with how Sage can be used as a tool in this process. So there is a question, how do I know which training belongs to which grant?
Okay, so in terms of your discretionary grant, it's always going to be training that is accredited. So it needs to have result in a qualification or part of a qualification. So like I've mentioned, skills programs, learnerships, internships, apprenticeships, those are the types of funding you can get or training you have to look at when it comes to the discretionary grant. With the mandatory grant, you can look at everything outside of that. So mandatory grants cover your operational requirements, your health and safety requirements, even your internal training. It's important to keep a register when you're doing internal training so that we know who's attended the class, who the facilitator was, how long it is. And just a tip for when you're pricing internal training, it depends on the hourly rate of the facilitator. So when you're capturing that, you would look at if it was 1 hour of training and the facilitator's rate is 150 Rand an hour, then each of those participants would carry 150 Rand as a cost of the training.
All right. Then the other question was just asking about the actual presentation and accessing the link afterwards. See, got a little heart reaction there. Thanks for your response, Linnell. I think let's quickly go to the slide just on how you can use Sage as a tool in this process. As we're presenting this last bit, focusing on the system, please use the Q&A if you have more questions. We'll give a final opportunity at the end for Linnell to answer any questions. Just to add on to what Linnell was saying earlier, we, of course, at B&H we implement systems. That is what we do. That is a very part of a big part of our core business. So Sage is a very useful tool for L&D practitioners. So we, of course, can look at it from a record-keeping perspective. So yes, from a compliance perspective, the system can definitely help you. It's very easy to pull out reports to the system. You can load your attendance registers. You can track reports, split it per department to see who did what and when. But you can also use it from a strategic point of view. So not only for compliance, but also for planning, as Linnell was explaining. So in terms of engaging your staff, engaging your managers, your head of departments, even up to employee level, you can use Sage and the employee self-service functionality or platform to collect data in terms of what skills would you like to see, what sort of training would you like to see. And it's such an easy way to engage your staff because they would already be accessing that platform for other payroll functions. So it's everything on one place. Also, a very nice functionality on the system that I'd like to highlight is the link between your performance management and skills development. A lot of the times we see companies using the performance process as a way to then identify those sorts of skill shortages and gaps that need to be filled from a capability point of view. And what the system offers is what we call a development plan. And that is quite useful in the sense of being able to then say, I have perhaps not been rated so well on one specific KPI, but this is what I can do from a skills point of view. I can request training, qualifications, even log things like mentorship or self-study on that same platform. And that leads me into the last point, is how you can really use a system to not only plan and be strategic about skills, but really to facilitate a culture that supports and encourages continuous learning by giving people a place to capture and record and really engage with your system. and really to support that culture of being pro-learning. So in the quote we just like to end off with is successful learning requires two things: a solution that people want to engage with and content they find meaningful. And from both Lynelle and myself and the broader P&H family, we hope you had a very positive and meaningful session with us today, and that it's really added value to you personally, but also for the business that you're in currently. So Lynelle, you can maybe just, in conclusion, I think thanks so much for everyone's reaction on the chat. Thank you so much. Lynelle, you did such a great job with the slides. And your presentation, if you can maybe just display the service offerings for us. Yeah, we do have service offerings linked to all of these elements that we've discussed today. You can book a demo for us if you'd like to see the systems we offer and we can help you implement. Lynelle, there's a question from the chat from Anista. Did you guys say that employees can capture their training needs on ESS? Yes, we did. So employees can actually, on Sage 300 People, that specific software, can actually log training requests that can be linked to a approval workflow to let your manager or your L&D practitioner, depending how you set it up, they can actually go request for that training. As Lynelle mentioned, just because they request it doesn't necessarily mean it will be approved, but you then use those training requests to actually, and that, Anista, is the skills development module. You're welcome to reach out after the session and we can help you get that sorted. So it's the skills development HR module that I was giving an example on Sage 300 People. So yeah, thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for the comments in the chat and your engagement with us. You can scan that QR code to speak to Tarsha, who will assist you with any sort of queries on the service offerings that we provide. You're welcome to reach out to Lynelle or myself. And yeah, Lynelle, do you want to maybe just mention something about the consultation that we also offer?
Yes, so we are offering the clients a 30-minute consultation, a complimentary consultation, just to take you guys through the tool. If you are unaware of what your possible talent budget could be through the discretionary and mandatory grants, you're welcome to book that session with us, but have some of your information ready in terms of your payroll for the year, for example, in your head count, in order for us to properly ascertain what that talent budget could be. I think it's also important, if you're struggling with budget or to get buy-in, it would be nice to be able to show the powers that be the benefit of training and how we can move from it being an out-of-pocket expense for the company to what we can gain from the SETA. Because remember, you guys as a company are paying the STL anyway. It's going to SARS, and that budget, if you're not claiming it, is then going to help other people upskill their employees. And you guys are always going to be on the back foot in terms of competitive advantage.
All right, so I'll just put the contact details in the chat. Please scan this code on your laptop if you want, on your phone, just to get our sales consultant Tarsha's details. But we will also send a follow-up email to everyone who registered for the session. So that QR code will give you Tarsha's contact information. I've just popped my details in the chat to you as well. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us in the call. Thanks for the engagement. We enjoyed having you with us. And yeah, please be on the lookout for our next webinar. We do quarterly HR webinars. So we hope to see you attend another one of our sessions. Thanks, Lynelle. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.